Good evening. Everybody hear me okay? Is that too loud? Almost sounds too loud in my own ears. So my name is Jason Graham. For those of you that don't know me, my wife and I have been coming to Keller since 2018. And this is my first time to preach. So I'm grateful to the elders for this opportunity. Grateful to my wife for watching the kids so much while I got ready. And grateful to my in-laws who are here to corral them so that she can listen. One thing that I have loved about Keller since we came here has been Corey. And Corey is the master of the segue. He will start way over here with something you think, this can't possibly be related to what we're going to talk about. This is just him breaking the ice. I remember one time, I think it was about a piece of trash in his front yard. And then when he realized what it was some piece of plumbing equipment or something, and he funneled that masterfully into our lesson. I don't have a segue. So the reason I don't have a segue is because I don't want to give the impression that I came upon this lesson out of my great hubris or wisdom of myself. So I was asked to teach on Job, and this sounded like a good title for a lesson on Job. So it's not, I don't want you thinking like, this guy, look at the nerve of this guy stepping up the first time, going to preach about why bad things happen to good people. So it's not hubris, I promise. I was just asked to teach on Job. But before we get into our selection this evening, this is a question. Why do bad things happen to good people, or why do bad things happen at all? This is a question that everyone will ask at some point. People of our faith, people of different faiths, people of no faith. And so before we begin searching the scriptures for the answer or the response to this question, I want to go back. I want to start at the very beginning. I don't know if this is there, which, do I hit down? Try that. Okay, so in the beginning, God created a garden that he put Adam and Eve into. In the center of the garden were two trees, two specific trees, one the tree of life, the other the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And so, at first glance, we think, we look at the dilemma and we say, okay, is man going to choose to remain in ignorance? Is he going to choose to be satisfied with lounging around and eating fruit with no cares in the world? Or is he going to try to obtain knowledge, try to grasp at something? But I would argue that this really isn't the primary dilemma of what is happening in the first few pages of Genesis. The English word evil carries a lot more baggage than the Hebrew word. So good and evil, the Hebrew words are tov and ra. And the word ra, we translate evil, again, doesn't have the same kind of baggage that the English word evil does. The word ra is sometimes just meant to describe something that's bad. And the prophets, the word ra is, I think God compares Israel to some spoiled figs. You are raw figs. He's not saying they're evil figs, he's just saying they've gone bad. You've spoiled. And so, I would suggest that the tree is not necessarily good and evil, but just good and bad, right and wrong. And so the tree is a source of wisdom. And so the question is not, is man going to remain ignorant and spend his days lounging around eating the fruit? But his question is, where will I go for wisdom? To whom will I seek to find these things out? Will I try to seize it for myself? Will I try to be wise in my own eyes? To try to obtain wisdom apart from God? Because they're going to need wisdom. Okay, this scenario that I've painted for you of the man lounging around, that's not the case. Because God has given him a task, a very important task. He said, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it. He has given man dominion over everything. You cannot rule in ignorance and expect your kingdom to last. So the assumption is that the man and woman will obtain wisdom somehow. The question becomes, how? How will you become wise? And on whose terms? On yours or on God's? Because what's happening at this point? God is walking around in the garden with them, teaching them. Just like anytime you're with your children, what are you doing? You're teaching them. Hey, let's put on a coat. It's cold outside. Wisdom. Hey, have you gone to the bathroom before we get in the car ride? Wisdom. So the assumption is that God is going to give them wisdom, but in His time, not in theirs. And so one of the many things I love about Scripture is this story. I've studied briefly, not in depth, I've studied briefly other major world religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, again, just briefly, trying to better understand my fellow man, where could someone else be coming from? And obviously, I find all of those religions lacking, and especially in their estimation of why things are the way they are. What's going on in the world? What's the problem we need fixed? And so the thing I love so much about Scripture is its diagnosis of the human condition. This right here. This is, to me at least, the diagnosis of the human condition. We have tried to be wise apart from God, and it has led us to destruction. We have tried to be wise in our own eyes, to decide for ourselves what is good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong. Everywhere you look, past, present, and future, this is what humanity is prone to do. We do not wait for the wisdom that comes from God. We try to make ourselves God. We try to allow ourselves to determine what is right and what is wrong. So if you're watching this tonight, if you're here tonight, or if you're someone who's watching this on the internet years from now, because you Googled this question, this must be where you begin, the garden. What will you choose? Will you choose to listen to God's wisdom, to wait patiently for it? Or will you try to be wise in your own eyes? Here tonight, this is what we are doing. We are saying no to that tree and saying yes to God. God, walk with me in the garden. You teach me. You teach me what is right and what is wrong. So that's where we start. Let's go to our text tonight, the book of Job. Job is one of several books called the wisdom literature. Generally, these are Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Job, and sometimes the Song of Solomon gets thrown in there because of its association with Solomon and Solomon's association with wisdom. But in general, we think of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job as being the big-time players in the wisdom literature. And there's generally two types. There's Proverbs, which represents a type of wisdom called proverbial wisdom. Catchy. And generally, it's composed of a collection of sayings. These sayings are short, catchy, imprecise, in some cases, but generally true. Similar to look before you leap, a stitch in time saves nine. They're catchy. They're meant, and they're generally applicable. Job and Ecclesiastes are not of this type. They are a type of wisdom called speculative wisdom. Okay? Speculative wisdom is where the character or characters wrestle through something, and you, as the reader, are supposed to wrestle with them. Okay? It's through extended monologue, in the case of Ecclesiastes, or in Job, an extended dialogue between multiple parties. Okay? And you are supposed to be along for the ride. You are supposed to be on this emotional and theological roller coaster with the characters involved. So we start off in the land of Uz. It's important to note that this does not occur in Israel, and none of the characters are Israelites. Okay? There is no historical context. It says nothing about in the year of King, the fourth year of King so-and-so. The author simply doesn't care to provide us with that information. He doesn't want to burden you with trying to figure out the historical Job. Okay, that's peripheral to his argument. He simply wants you to be engrossed in the story. Okay, so we really don't know where Uz was. And again, none of these characters are Israelites. We don't know when the events occurred, and that's frankly not the point. The point is to understand what's going on in the story. So we begin with this man, Job, who is blameless and upright. He's very wealthy, and he's very blessed. Okay? Then we are transported to the divine sphere. God is holding a divine council meeting. And the adversary shows up. And the reason I say the adversary is because that's what it says in Hebrew. Okay? So the whole book of Job is meant to challenge your preconceptions about what's going on in the world. So that's what I'm here to do tonight as well. So the adversary. Okay, the Old Testament uses the word Satan several times, and many times in reference to something other than the typical adversary, the supernatural evil character that we consider. So when Solomon rebels against God, God raises up adversaries. He raises up Satans against Solomon. The angel of the Lord is even called Satan in Numbers 22. Balaam goes with Balak to go and curse Israel, and it says the angel of the Lord stood in the road as his adversary, as his Satan. Okay? So, the identity of this character, is it Satan as we typically think? Probably, maybe. But let's just imagine that this adversary is simply just another member of the council who happens to disagree with God. He is adversarial to God in this one instance only. Okay? Because we see other instances where the divine council appears, and they're allowed to have separate opinions about how things should be done. We see this in 1 Kings 22. God holds a council meeting to try to decide how to get rid of King Ahab. King Ahab has got to go. Let's get rid of him. And all the divine council members pipe in, and they all have their own opinions, and God says, you there, what did you say? All right, let's do it. That plan's going to work. So, in any case, this character appears, and he disagrees with how God runs things. Okay? Because he says that Job's only blessed, or Job only obeys you because he's blessed. He's working the system. Okay? He's manipulating you. And God says, okay, let's put your theory to the test. Go out and take away all his blessings. And that's what the adversary does. The adversary leaves, and he goes and he takes everything from Job. His children, his flocks and herds, servants, everything. In an instant, Job loses everything. And many of us know this story. You know, he says, naked I came from my mother's womb, naked I will depart. May the name of the Lord be praised. And it says, Job did not sin, by charging God with wrong. Another council meeting occurs. Same kind of thing. God says to the adversary, hey, Job still maintains his integrity even though you incited me against him. He says, skin for skin. Strike the man himself and he will curse you. And God again says, okay, let's put your theory to the test. Go out. You may afflict his body, but don't kill him. And so he goes out and he afflicts Job with sores from his head to his feet. And Job breaks a pot and scratches himself and sits in the dust and mourns. And his wife comes and says, are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die. And he says, you're speaking like one of the foolish people. Okay, shall we accept good from God and not trouble? Okay, so this is where we are now. Then, as the story goes on, 3 of Job's friends arrive, and then a 4th comes later. So again, none of these are Israelites. We have Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, Zophar the Naamathite, and then Elihu the son of Barachel the Buzite comes later. Okay? So now let's get into the structure of the body of the book. Okay, and this can be thought of as a triangle. Okay, and this is not original to me. I'm not so wise as to come up with this. And on the 3 angles of the triangle, we have God's justice, Job's innocence, and the retribution principle. So the retribution principle is basically the idea that the universe runs in a certain way. The good get good and the bad get bad. Okay? And as we go through the book, we're going to see how each character addresses the relationship of these things interacting. So let's begin with Job. Job is on this emotional roller coaster. He's trapped between knowing he is innocent, knowing that he has done nothing wrong, and believing so strongly and fiercely that the world is supposed to work a certain way. The world is not supposed to run this way. And so that leaves Job questioning God's justice. He can't wrap his mind around what's going on, so this is the only thing he can think of. So we're going to read a lot of text tonight, but again, speculative wisdom, you really don't want to cherry pick, so I would encourage you strongly to, tonight or very soon, go home and read the book of Job from start to finish. It really doesn't take that long, and it's fascinating to be on that emotional roller coaster with the characters. That is smaller than I thought it was going to be. I'll read it from up here. So the first thing he does is he laments his birth. Job chapter 3. Let the day perish on which I was born, and the night that said, a man is conceived. Let that day be darkness. May God above not seek it, nor light shine upon it. Let gloom and deep darkness claim it. Let clouds dwell upon it. Let the blackness of the day terrify it. That night, let thick darkness seize it. Let it not rejoice among the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of the months. Behold, let that night be barren. Let no joyful cry enter it. Let those curse it who curse the day, who are ready to rouse up Leviathan. Okay. Basically, Job just wishes that day were eaten off the calendar by the great sea monster. And we'll come back to him. He also holds fast to his innocence. Chapter 27 says, as God lives, who has taken away my right, and the Almighty who has made my soul bitter, as long as my breath is in me and the Spirit of God is in my nostrils, my lips will not speak falsehood and my tongue will not utter deceit. Far be it from me to say that you are right. Till I die, I will not put away my integrity from me. I hold fast to my righteousness and will not let it go. My heart does not reproach me for any of my days. He wishes to plead his case. The whole book is building in suspense and in momentum towards this anticipated courtroom scene. But Job is so torn. He wants his day in court, but he doesn't know how in the world it could possibly go well when God is the judge and when God is the cause. He says, if it is a contest of strength, behold, he is mighty. If it is a matter of justice, who can summon him? Though I am in the right, my own mouth would condemn me. Though I am blameless, he would prove me perverse. He is so at odds. He wants his day in court so bad, but he's terrified of it because he doesn't see how in the world it could possibly go well for him, even though he's innocent. And finally, he's left with nothing but to question God's justice. It is all one, therefore I say. He destroys both the blameless and the wicked. When disaster brings sudden death, he mocks at the calamity of the innocent. The earth is given into the hands of the wicked. He covers the faces of its judges. If it is not he, who then is it? And that one is much too small. Chapter 16. God gives me up to the ungodly and casts me into the hands of the wicked. I was at ease, and he broke me apart. He seized me by the neck and dashed me to pieces. He set me up as his target. His archers surround me. He slashes open my kidneys and does not spare. He pours out my gall on the ground. He breaks me with breach upon breach. He runs upon me like a warrior. I have sewed sackcloth upon my skin and have laid my strength in the dust. My face is red with weeping, and on my eyelids is deep darkness, although there is no violence in my hands, and my prayer is pure. Job is in a rough spot. Next, we come back to our triangle. And we want to understand the perspective of Job's friends. So this doesn't really illustrate it, but they're actually going back and forth, back and forth. It's not all Job and then all his friends and then God's response. It goes back and forth. Each time Job speaks, a friend replies to him. But for convenience sake, we're dividing it up like this. So Job's friends, they find themselves on this side of the triangle. They know God is just, and they know how the world works. Okay, they know that the world runs a certain way, and so they're left with nothing but to question Job's innocence. So they assume the retribution principle. Remember, who that was innocent ever perished? Or where were the upright cut off? As I have seen, those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. By the breath of God they perish, and by the blast of his anger they are consumed. Okay, they insist that Job repents. How long will you say these things, and the words of your mouth be a great wind? Does God pervert justice, or does the Almighty pervert the right? If your children have sinned against him, he has delivered them into the hand of their transgression. If you will seek God and plead with the Almighty for mercy, if you are pure and upright, surely then he will rouse himself for you and restore your rightful habitation. And though your beginning was small, your latter days will be very great. Okay, but we as the reader, we know this is not the case. Job has nothing for which to repent. This is the conflict. This is what we're supposed to wrestle with. What's going on? And again, the tension is building. The more Job insists that he's innocent, the more irritated and frustrated his friends become, to the point where they even fabricate these accusations against him. And I apologize, this text is far too small, but I'll read it to you. Job 22, can a man be profitable to God? Surely he who is wise is profitable to himself. Is it any pleasure to the Almighty if you are in the right? Or is it gain to him if you make your ways blameless? Is it for your fear of him that he reproves you and enters into judgment with you? Is not your evil abundant? There is no end to your iniquities. For you have exacted pledges of your brothers for nothing, and stripped the naked of their clothing. You have given no water to the weary to drink, and you have withheld bread from the hungry. The man with power possessed the land, and the favored man lived in it. You have sent widows away empty, and the arms of the fatherless were crushed. So Job's friends are really letting him have it. You notice I have comforters in quotation marks. Job multiple times accuses them of being terrible comforters, which they are. Then the fourth friend shows up. This is Elihu. And Elihu has a slightly more sophisticated approach. He has a more sophisticated take on perhaps what's going on. So he speaks in 33, says, "For God speaks in one way and in two, though man does not perceive it. In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls on men while they slumber on their beds, then he opens the ears of men and terrifies them with warnings, that he may turn man aside from his deed and conceal pride from a man. He keeps back his soul from the pit, his life from perishing by the sword." So Elihu's perspective is, well, Job, you claim to be innocent. Perhaps you are. God must have sent this as a way to prevent your future sin. You must have had something coming that God needed to wake you up from before you stepped in it. And again, this is perhaps a more sophisticated response, but it still fails Job. He still insists that he is innocent. Then the whirlwind. God speaks to Job out of the whirlwind. God knows that Job is innocent, and he knows that he is just. So what does he make his case against? He makes his case against our assumptions of how the world should work. The first thing that God does is he takes Job on a tour of the cosmos. God says, "Job, you think that I don't know what's going on? Well, let me tell you. Let me ask you a few questions. Have you comprehended the expanse of the earth? Declare if you know all this. Where is the way to the dwelling of light, and where is the place of darkness, that you may take it to its territory, and that you may discern the path to its home? You know, for you were born then, and the number of your days is great." So he starts off and he goes through all creation, all these things that Job could not possibly understand, possibly fathom. Where does the snow come from? How is the hail brought forth? All these things that Job has no way of knowing. But then God even brings it a step lower, and he brings it to the world that Job can observe. Animals, plants, things that Job could see, and still asks him. "The wings of the ostrich wave proudly, but are they the pinions and plumage of love? For she leaves her eggs to the earth and lets them be warmed on the ground, forgetting that a foot may crush them and that the wild beast may trample them. She deals cruelly with her young, as if they were not hers. Though her labor be in vain, yet she has no fear, because God has made her forget wisdom and given her no share in understanding." Job, do you know where the mountain goats give birth? Do you know why the ostrich lays its eggs on the ground? You've seen it, but can you tell me why? And again, Job has no answer. The next thing God asks Job is basically, I want you to try to do my job for a day. Chapter 40. "Adorn yourself with majesty and dignity. Clothe yourself with glory and splendor. Pour out the overflowings of your anger, and look on everyone who is proud and abase him. Look on everyone who is proud and bring him low, and tread down the wicked where they stand. Hide them all in the dust together. Bind their faces in the world below. Then will I also acknowledge to you that your own right hand can save you." So again, Job has no way of doing this. Job has no way of striking down the wicked where they stand, bringing peace to the earth. So he again must hold his tongue. God's concluding arguments can be a little confusing. God presents Job with two creatures, Behemoth and Leviathan. "Behold, Behemoth, which I made as I made you. He eats grass like an ox. Behold, his strength is in his loins, and his power in the muscles of his belly. He makes his tail stiff like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze, his limbs like bars of iron. He is the first of the works of God. Let him who made him bring near his sword." Leviathan, "I will not keep silence." So this is God speaking again. "I will not keep silence concerning his limbs or his mighty strength or his goodly frame. Who can strip off his outer garment? Who would come near him with a bridle? Who can open the doors of his face? Around his teeth is terror." So what's going on here? What's the argument here? So there's a couple of different perspectives. We saw earlier that the Leviathan appears earlier in the book, okay, when Job is speaking. Another creature appears in the book twice, in chapters 9 and chapters 26, Rahab, not to be confused with the Rahab from Joshua. This is a mythological beast, generally thought to symbolize the forces of evil, the forces of chaos in the world. We see it also in Isaiah, and we see the Leviathan also in Isaiah and in the Psalms. So some people have said, well, we see Rahab and Leviathan, and these are generally symbols of chaos, symbols of death and destruction, enemies of God, and we often see them being smited, judged, again in Psalms and Isaiah. So some will say, well, we have Rahab and Leviathan, perhaps Behemoth is lumped into this. It's another representation of the forces of evil, cosmic evil and chaos. So the Leviathan would be the representation from the sea, and the Behemoth would be the representation from the land and the rivers, based on its description. So that still leaves us with questions. If this is the case, why does God appear so pleased with them? Why are there not passages where God speaks of how they will be judged? Why does he not keep silent about their goodly frame? And if these are animals, which is another perspective, why is God apparently so pleased with these animals that are clearly not compatible with human safety? They clearly have no regard for human life. They would end you in an instant. So, what's going on here? Why is God okay with this? And that's where it ends. Job repents. He says, clearly I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me. And this is something that's so interesting. God affirms Job. He gets on to the three friends. He says, you have not spoken about me what is right, as my servant Job has. Now, we read earlier some of the things that Job said. God mocks the calamity of the innocent? Is God talking about just some of the things that Job said? Or all of the things that Job said? And why is God okay with some of the things that Job said? Okay? And Job is restored after he prays for his friends. Again, very interesting. Job serves as the intercessor for his friends. So do we have answers here, or do we only have more questions? Was the adversary right? Was his estimation correct? Did he win in this wager with God? He never reappears. He's left in chapter 2. He never again shows up. And how does God run the world? What is going on here? Again, we're meant to be brought along through the struggle. We're meant to have these questions. So, let's try to put it all together and really come out with the perspective that we should. God's first response was that I'm not blind, I'm not deaf. I know everything. I know everything that you don't. I was here from the beginning, and everything has been made through me. I am not unjust. Okay? I do not lack the strength to judge the wicked where they stand. Okay? Danger and evil. Again, depending on your interpretation of those beasts, physical danger, cosmic evil, they're both there. God makes no mention of putting an end to them anytime soon. Okay? But God affirms Job's struggle. That's the point. Struggle with me. What does Israel mean? Struggles with God. Because in the struggle is where you find him. In the struggle, in the search, and in the pain is often where we find him, where we get closest to him. So our perspective here is the same as it is in the garden. Trust in God. Trust in who I am. Trust in where you are. Understand that all is in my hands. And what do we see in Jesus? In this world you will have trouble. But take heart. I have overcome the world. We have many questions, and that's simply the point. Struggle with them. Wrestle with them. Talk to God. Open yourself to him, and he will be there. If you're here tonight and you're struggling, perfect. This is where you should be. Tonight, if you need prayers, if you'd like to put Jesus, your Savior, on in baptism, I hope that you will. Let's come forward as we stand and sing.